Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beer and Broadband. My name is Nick. I've got my beer, and we're going to talk broadband today. And I've got some amazing guests on today. We have a lot to talk about. Bead-in-America, kind of like Beer in America, but Bead-in-America. We're going to talk a lot about some of the new rules out there that are going on and some advice to give to the people out in the broadband community. But before we do that, let's do introductions. Two of these guests have been on the episode before, and then we have a brand new person. So, Lori, why don't you kick us off as the newbie onto Beer and Broadband?
Thanks, Nick. It's great to be here with Jade and Megan and you today. This is awesome. So much fun to do this. My name is Lori Adams. I'm the Vice President of Broadband Policy and Funding Strategy for Nokia. I'm on the government affairs team there and work closely with all the sales and business groups for implementing our broadband strategy. And I'm not a newbie to broadband. I've been in the industry for 20 plus years now. And so, but this is definitely the most exciting time to be in broadband. And so I'm excited to be here today talking with these wonderful women about what's going on.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. And you're coming to us from?
I am located in Boulder, Colorado.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
And I don't have a beer with me today, but my drink of choice would be a Guinness. So.
Ooh, oh, heavy. All right, Megan.
I am Megan Beresford. I am the Director of Broadband Programs at Learn, Design, Apply. We are a grant consulting and management firm with a specialized team that just focuses on broadband grants. My drink today is a Spindrift, but were I to have a beer, I'm definitely an IPA gal, and am actually just up the street from Lori here in Denver.
Well, welcome. And as some of you know, Megan has been the host of this podcast in the past and is an often guest, so welcome back. And last but certainly not least, Jade.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for having me. Always great to hang out with Lori and Megan, even if it's virtually. Looking forward to seeing you all in person soon. Again, I am the Director of the Kansas Office of Broadband Development. Been in this role since last June. Prior to that, I was on the industry side of things in the private sector for about 7 years. So it's been interesting to view this whole grant world from the public-facing perspective. And my drink of choice is any kind of sparkling water, much like Megan. Although I do enjoy a good Hefeweizen when I'm not working.
Do you like Topo Chico?
You know, I haven't tried that. I shouldn't admit that because it's very bougie.
Well, welcome all of you guys. Really happy to have you. My beer of choice today is it's in a glass, but it is Upslope. So I think it's Colorado beer, right? Yeah, Boulder. Yeah, Boulder. So.
Are you also in Colorado, Nick?
I'm in Colorado. Yeah, I'm in Denver as well, right up the road from Lori and Megan. So we're, mile high.
Very good.
Awesome. Well, guys, let's jump right into it. So I think there's obviously, if you, all of us are in the broadband industry, and if you click on anything, any headline, any tweet, I guess it's not a tweet, it's an X, whatever we want to call it these days. It's, Bead, everything, it's a lot about Bead, right? Everything is about the funding. And there's been a lot of new rules out there. And I've talked to, actually, it was just this weekend, talking to some people in the industry, and they were lamenting about how complicated it is about trying to understand some of this stuff. So I guess, when you think about some of these new, Bead-in-America, the rules around products having to be made here, maybe you can help educate the audience about what's changed, what's new, and why does it even matter? Lori?
All right, I'll jump into this one. So, the Buy America is not a new concept. Here in the U.S., there's a number of programs that have had Buy American rules around the purchase of equipment and other products manufactured in the U.S. for a long time. What is new is the Build America, Buy America Act, which was part of the infrastructure bill. And basically it applies to all of the programs that were part of the infrastructure bill and requires any financial funding assistance to be spent on products and equipment that meet the Buy America mandate. Which, there's two parts of the Build America Buy America Act. It's criteria number one is that the item is manufactured in the United States, and criteria number two is that 55% of the cost of the components are sourced in the United States. And this is what's new, really, for us in broadband, is that this is the first time that the Build America Buy America type of provisions have been applied to broadband electronics. We're used to it kind of being in the construction materials, concrete, steel industry, but this is the first time that it's been applied to broadband electronics. In the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, in a dozen years ago, that program for broadband waived all of the Buy America requirements for broadband electronics. So we at Nokia and others in the industry have spent the better part of a year or more looking at this, really kind of trying to figure out how we meet this requirement. And the challenge was that if you look at broadband electronics, there's dozens and dozens of components that are make up the products. If you take the top off your router or some of the equipment in the field, you kind of think to yourself, what's in there? There's all kinds of stuff in there. And so this was a real challenge for our industry. And at Nokia, we took, kind of really spent thousands of hours examining our supply chains, our products, how we meet the Buy America mandate. And the net result of that was on August 3rd, we were able to make an announcement in public with the Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, that we were establishing manufacturing for 4 types of broadband electronics in the U.S. And, it was a very exciting moment for those of us who'd worked for over a year on this project. But it's definitely a challenge. It is a challenge as we're working through the sets of rules, and the limited waiver has now been released by NTIA. I'm sure we'll get into that in a few minutes. But overall, this has been a challenge for our industry to try to figure out, how can we accomplish the goals of the administration, close the digital divide, and meet the important goal of manufacturing products here in the United States. And so,
well, congratulations to your.
Yeah, thank
awesome.
you. More
Cheers
than
to that.
Cheers to that.
years have been had over this one. So, yeah, thank you. It was a big moment.
I guess maybe zoom out a little bit, and anybody can answer this, because when we say broadband electronics, I don't know that everybody actually understands what that even means.
Good point. So yeah, there's many different parts of when you think of a broadband network, the physical layout of a network, there's all different parts of that, right? You have kind of what you think of as sort of the way in the back, the actual equipment that powers the fiber electronics, but what we are talking about is access products, basically the things that you attach to your fiber to make sure that a customer has broadband internet access. So we're talking, in the technical terms, it's an OLT, an ONT. These are optical network terminals, optical line terminals, optical line cards, and optical line terminal modules, optics modules. And so these are all the products that help make broadband happen, that bring internet to a house.
Yeah. And Laura, you talked about, this has been such a challenge for the industry, but what's so exciting is that you all rose to the challenge, right? And why shouldn't American companies and American workers have a hand in this historic generational infrastructure moment, right? And so I think it's been really cool to see the success of Nokia, and we saw Corning invest. We're seeing Adtran invest and build more jobs. CommScope. There's a lot of companies that are really rising to the occasion and leveraging these tax dollars to build these American tax dollars to build American jobs. And so I think it's a really exciting. It's an exciting representation of what happens if you stick to your guns policy wise, because everyone was wringing their hands a couple of months ago and saying it couldn't be done. But I'm really proud of the work you've done, Lori, and others, because we're getting it done.
Jade, so why do you think why is it important from a state broadband perspective though? Why does it matter to you guys?
Well, because it's not just an infrastructure act, right? It's a jobs act too, and we want to build up the next generation of telecommunications workers and show people that there's a lot of promise in these career fields, and so I think it's an exciting opportunity to again rebuild this domestic and strengthen this domestic industry. So I mean, we want to get it done, but I think there's a lot of worry that this is going to maybe add costs, but there are other reasons besides strengthening jobs and the economy that I think this is a good idea. National security being another one, and the pandemic really highlighted what happens if you don't have onshoring, of really much needed products. And so I think this effort to diversify and onshore our supply chain in this industry provides a lot of benefit and begins to restore America's dominance in manufacturing and technology sectors. So I think it's really exciting, and it's not without pain points and not without challenge, but really great for our state, I think, to be able to build up these jobs.
Yeah, I think all the casinos in Vegas right now would agree that some of the supply chain issues they want more onshoring, given their situation. So Megan, what do you from your perspective on the rules and the grants? How does this make your life more difficult, or is this more fun?
Well, I first kind of want to follow up, with Jade and, really applauding the manufacturers like Nokia and that have stepped up and made this happen. With a acknowledgement as well to NTIA, because I think they did listen to a lot of the voices in the community and the concerns, and had their own kind of way of addressing these and acknowledging, that we hear you, we see this issue, so let us see what we can do for more clarity. Because I think for the guidance on BEAD, as detailed as it is also still a little vague, which makes sense when you think about it's being applied to 56 different areas. So it needs to be vague, right? Because what Jade is going to be doing in Kansas isn't going to be, all of that similar perhaps to what's happening in Hawaii. And so I think that there was a reason behind the vagueness, but I've seen NTIA stepping up into the parts where we have had that kind of concern voiced from the industry. Which is encouraging, right? And so I think the next thing we're looking at that there's the big talk about is the letter of credit requirement. And so kind of another one of those things where I think we understand the reasoning behind it and the need for some form of surety when you're giving away, as Jade says, billions of taxpayer dollars, to make sure that they're used and they're not used incorrectly.
So maybe go into that, because maybe not everybody understands what that actually means.
Yeah,
we have a diverse audience here, so
absolutely. So and Jade and Lori, please step in if I get something wrong. It's been a day, but so the BEAD requires subgrantees, which is going to be the actual folks applying for funds, to have a letter of credit from a qualifying financial institution to cover part of their project as a clawback measure, right? So the government wants to say, if you fail on this, we want to be able to take back from this letter of credit the funds that we lost, right? Because you couldn't complete your project, whatever it might be. The issue is that this really, it won't be such a problem for some of, your really big providers, but for your small minority-owned businesses, for your mom and pop shops, even for city governments and municipalities, it kind of edges them out because it's very hard for those entities to get this. Those folks have to have those funds on hand set aside to get the letter of credit. So that means, if they need $4 million in their letter of credit, they need to kind of set that aside and not touch it, right? And so for a lot of these smaller firms that don't have that kind of funds to set aside, the need for that or that requirement, can really shut them out from even applying. So people have, we recognize the need for surety, but are proposing other ways of meeting this, right? To be more inclusive and make sure you can get a big variety of providers, which I think is what the solution really is, right? It's not.
You don't want a monopoly.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens. I don't know, Jade, Lori, what kind of traction you've been seeing lately on this, but I think this is kind of one of those.
Yeah.
I think after BABA, this was like what folks are focusing on.
Yeah.
So.
And there is a broad consortium, I think, being led by Connect Humanity that's really working on that advocacy piece to the NTIA. And as you mentioned, Megan, I've been really impressed with NTIA's responsiveness to feedback like this. And I still hold out hope that there can be a change in that. I would rather that money that's being kind of held back go to the actual deployment of these networks. And I think that even large companies would like that too. We're seeing a lot of feedback from our smaller providers that it disadvantages them. And, in Kansas, we have 33 rural or RLECs, and we have some CLECs, and we don't have just the large companies interested in doing this work. These rural companies have been doing the work of fiber to the home builds in very remote areas for over a decade. And so we don't obviously want to ice them out because they know those communities and they're already doing the work. So we know they're capable of doing the work. We have measures. Our office is relatively new. It's only 3 years old, but we've managed 135 projects, and we have measures in place such as only reimbursing for expenses spent on grants during the period, of performance that help minimize the risk. And so we agree that there are alternative options that might be more inclusive and that will really better benefit the goal of equity, which I think undergirds the Infrastructure Act at every level. So equitable distribution of these funds to anybody who wants to be a part of the solution and has a proven record of doing so.
So Lori, how does this play in, like, from a manufacturer perspective? Like, where do you guys, I mean, the rules, obviously you guys put a lot of hours into some of these changes, but do you see, a role or a, part of the process of trying to help these, either the smaller providers as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that is so critically important, and I think this goes to what Megan and Jade were just talking about as far as NTIA's responsiveness to solving problems. They recognize that these rules are and program requirements are tough, right, to negotiate. So, for example, in the waiver, the limited waiver that was issued a couple weeks ago by NTIA on the Buy America question, one of the things that they said in there was that they're going to create this list for manufacturers to self-certify the products that meet the Buy America requirements. And this is something that is not new to federal governments, and certainly the federal government, certainly states have been doing this. Qualified vendor lists, as well as debarment lists for companies that are not eligible to do business. But the converse is true. There's a lot of states out there and federal programs that publish qualified products that meet qualifications, or companies that meet qualifications. And so this is something that the states and Jade and applicants and grant writers can leverage to make sure that their box is checked on Buy America, because it's just not reasonable to ask the states or providers to vet all of the supply chains for the products that they're going to be spending. But it's really the simplest way to make sure that you're meeting that Buy America requirement is to just check that box. Does it line up with the list that's being published by NTIA? If so, then you meet the requirement. And on some of these other issues, I agree with Jade and Megan that as far as the letter of credit goes and some of these other things, that NTIA really has a vested interest in making sure that this program is successful. And the amount of time and energy they put into the Buy America waiver really shows their commitment to making sure that the requirements are reasonable and manageable. and have a pathway to compliance while at the same time recognizing that you need to meet the spirit of the law and the purpose of the program.
So I guess, are there areas of the ruling that you're concerned about though? I mean, all seems good stuff. Like obviously it costs manufacturers more money to do this. From a state perspective, Jay, I don't know how big your team is, but I'm sure it's not, you'll have hundreds of people on your staff. So some of this is going to be more work for the states too, right?
Yeah, there's a couple areas in the proposed waiver, which closes for comments on the 21st, by the way. So it's not too late to get your comments in. But one of the areas that they talk about, and this is relevant to the middle mile program also, is that there's reporting requirements for providers that they're going to need to report on products they purchase that are of foreign origin. And there's very little clarity on what that means. And again, when a state purchases a product, they don't necessarily know the supply chain for that product. Where does it come from? Where's the origin? So a lot of this is going to come back on the manufacturers. And so, this is kind of an area that we need to have a little bit more work to kind of put together something that protects some of the sensitivity around supply chains while accomplishing the goals. And also, I could foresee a situation where thousands of applicants could potentially be asking their manufacturers, no matter who it is, the origin of all of your products. And, you may have to provide every single one with a response. So, we need to kind of work on some of these other issues surrounding Buy America and some of the compliance to make sure that it's not really unduly burdensome, on the providers, on the manufacturers, on the companies that are trying to close the digital divide.
I will say that historically, our office has required a BOM on all applications. So we do ask for the bill of materials simply because some of the federal guidelines and say the Treasury programs prohibit use of certain equipment manufactured in China, right? That will go into our network. So, but validating that at the level of feed, because that is way further or way larger than anything we've ever tried to do. So I really appreciate your work on checking that box, and because I can't imagine having to validate the bill of materials at 100 or 200 or I don't even know how many projects.
Right, thousands across the states, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I guess that's, one of the questions is the money, some of the money we're pulling it back into the US, but it is actually increasing cost, right?
Well, but okay, maybe. I think, our providers have been really split on, is it really going to, increase it to an extent that, makes us unable to meet our universal connectivity goals. And, maybe, but some ISPs are really unbothered by all this and have told me, even the smaller ones, they've said that, if companies are prepared and if they're savvy in their negotiations, that they don't anticipate those costs going up a lot. But they acknowledge, that all grants have strings and this is just one of them. But others contend that the demand for materials will be so unprecedented, from 56 states and territories, that supply chain issues are bound to resurface, driving up costs and delays. And so I acknowledge that maybe it will increase costs to a certain extent, but there's an awful lot of Chicken Little happening here, and I think it's going to be okay. I've heard a lot of concern that people won't even apply for the grants. There's not going to be as much interest, but people were really concerned about that on the CHIPS Act too, especially with the child care provision that said you'd have to provide childcare at affordable rates to workers in companies who receive these funds. And they had over 300 statement of interests come in for that program. And so I think companies are going to step up, people are going to innovate, and we're going to get there with a lot less pain than is being predicted, I think. But maybe I have been accused of being Pollyanna-ish on a lot of things. So,
from a manufacturer perspective, I would think, obviously, Lori, this puts you guys in a really good position, and obviously there are other manufacturers doing this, but the easier you make it on the provider, the easier you make it in the whole process.
Right.
the
Oh
better.
yeah. No, I mean, aside from, we're providing information to states about how to leverage the NTIA qualified vendor list that they're creating, but also providers, more importantly, on the applicant side of things, because and love to hear Megan's perspective on this. When you're preparing an application, one of the things you have to box check on your side, on that side, is Buy America compliance, supply chain risk management plans. And so we're really taking a look at how we can simplify that process for our customers and provide them with materials that they can just slip into their application. It's something that
Not to be on a tangent, but just on that point. So obviously AI is big right now. So for testing, you can actually put into ChatGPT. You can create these compliance checklist material that will go into grants. Now, I don't know if they actually go into the process, Megan, or not, but it's a little scary how easy it is to be able to generate some of this.
Well, this would be Nokia specific stuff, but absolutely.
I know.
Yeah. No, it's for sure.
Megan, are you seeing any dodgy stuff coming in?
The bots don't have anything on Megan, Nick. She's
I mean, I will say, I think this is perhaps what the point was getting at. We have had some grant applications in some states where they request backup of everything that you're putting in your budget. So whether that's a quote from a vendor, whether it's a past invoice, and it can be difficult to, we've spent a lot of time with people digging through their invoices, that they're basing their pricing around, and some vendors are really slow to get back to you. And so I think there is that kind of part of a grant with manufacturers and vendors that can certainly take up a lot of time, especially if you are a smaller firm that, you already have everyone wearing 7 hats and someone gets tasked with the awful thing of writing the grant. And, there are difficult parts of that when it comes to, just talking about your BOM and your manufacturing and being able to report on that correctly in your grant. But I think absolutely, I've had clients who have worked with Nokia, and Nokia has, very happily provided, the network diagrams that are required for these things. And, which is wonderful, because I've had to make a network diagram in clip art and it was really bad, but we had no other option. So anytime I don't have to do something like that is wonderful. And so I know there are folks, like Lori and her team, and, other companies that are willing to step in for some of those more nuanced grant requirements that I think, especially for some smaller providers, can be difficult to navigate.
What does happen? I mean, I don't know. What happens if somebody inadvertently, they go through the process, they're small, there's no ill will, there's no ill intent, but they miss it, right? I mean, and what are the rules? Do they just basically get booted out if they didn't check the box right?
I mean, it's a state by state thing. I'm sure Jade can kind of speak for how Kansas does it, but some states they'll follow up with you and say, hey, we noticed this was missing, or hey, we couldn't open this file, and you'll have the chance to rectify that. I think most states do that. I don't think I've yet had a state where they haven't followed up if there was some deficiency. I think it depends upon how many errors there are in the application. Yeah. So I don't know, Jade, if you have kind of thoughts on that.
We're pretty lenient on, I guess, what NTIA or some federal agencies would call curing. We do send it back and allow people. But when we're dealing with a program that is so large, I don't know if we're going to have that, that luxury of time. We try to do quite a few webinars on the front end for technical assistance and provide technical assistance throughout. It's interesting, though, something you were saying about the small providers and the difficulty they might have in providing detail. We've actually found the opposite. The largest providers are the most hesitant to provide details about their materials. And that's because they may have specific contractual restraints with their vendors, especially on pricing, because they're not supposed to, it may be under confidentiality, right? That another thing that the NTIA is really encouraging us to look at is fixed price awards versus, validating every receipt that comes in for reimbursement. And we've never done that. But we are looking at that because they say, with an office of 9, I'm not sure you're going to have the capacity to do that. So, yeah, it's Bead is a game changer, and it's really testing all of our processes and the way we've done things in the past.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And I know Kansas has had programs. A lot of states have. Some are going to be doing programs for the first time, but I have a feeling that they're not going to necessarily look as they were before. I'm sure there might be similarities, but I've had some folks say, "Oh, well, we applied for this Montana one. We'll be good to apply for it again." And I'm like, well, it might be quite different from what you did last time. So
the scoring's pretty prescriptive.
Yeah.
There's flexibility within the scoring kind of primary and secondary criteria, but they lay out the primary and secondary criteria. Yeah. So it is a different ballgame. We are very proud of our scoring rubrics in Kansas and how we feel like we've really perfected them, and they are going right out the door. So making room for the new one.
So what do you guys think? So what's going to happen in the rest of this year? So let's talk about just the rest of this year. What are the gotchas? What are the things that you think are going to pop up that will be figured out in the next several months?
Well, I'd let Jade tell you what she's working on. Most of the states are, I think, focused on their 5-year plans if they haven't submitted them yet, publishing their BEAD initial proposals, volume 1, 2, or the entire thing in one fell swoop. I think there's going to be a lot of activity there. You might see some states start their, like Louisiana, start their challenge process, which is going to be an interesting exercise as well. So.
Yeah, I think that Lori really nailed it. States and territories are focused on those documents that are required to unlock the funding. And I thought everyone was going to get their 5-year action plans in by end of August, but there must have been several states who asked for an extension because many of them have not rolled in. The digital equity plans, are mostly due by end of November. The NTIA has taken to asking states to provide pre-submission review. And so we are on our 3rd round of pre-submission review for our digital equity plan, which we, had hoped to submit back in July or August. But we're really grateful that they're taking the time to walk us through things that aren't going to get approved on the front side so that we don't have to wait for that approval on the back side. And we're doing the same thing with our initial proposal. So our initial proposal 1 is already submitted. It's been through public comment. We were set to complete our initial proposal volume 2, last month, but we probably won't put that out for public comment until well into October now. And so then we have the public comment period, we submit, and I'm trying to avoid Christmas for the challenge process because all the states went through this last year with the FCC maps challenge process over Christmas, and nobody liked it and thought it was really unfair. But now I get it. It's like the way these deadlines line up, it kind of just sometimes falls at inopportune times. But if that is the case, we will definitely extend our challenge period because we want people to participate. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of that. A lot of states are still, administering their CPF funding. So there's still a lot of money right now being infused into broadband deployments and state programs, digital equity programs, where we'll be doing our Treasury digital DCT program yet this year. I think we're the only state that's been approved for that. So still a lot of activity on top of all of the BEAD stuff in the broadband space.
Do you think, Lori, we're going to see obviously supply chain in general has been a problem since COVID, but do we think as everything continues to ramp up, will there be supply chain issues? Not with Nokia, of course, but just in general, do you think there's going to be supply chain issues?
I think from everything that I've heard, recently from our teams, from other teams and conferences, Fiber Connect, is that supply chains are really, almost normalizing. They're back to sort of normal lead times on things as opposed to the COVID lead times on things, right? I mean, there's a big difference there. I mean, it doesn't take much to upend that apple cart. If you think back to 2008, 9, for those of us working in the BTOP days, you had the nuclear incident in Japan, Fukushima, which completely overnight killed the lead times on fiber, just because of the role that Japan plays in fiber optics. So it really it's a sensitive thing. It doesn't take much for that to shift. But I think there's been a lot of preparations made to scale to demand. People know what's coming. Manufacturers know it's coming, and as sort of we come out of that COVID period, I'm hopeful that things will look more normal going forward, even with the amount of activity that's going to happen and the demand on the supply chains. But it's one pandemic away from.
Don't put that out in the universe, Lori.
Wow. One pandemic away from it all going to hell again.
I want to compliment Jade, absolutely, and all the other states, but Jade's here, because the amount of work that you do and that other states are doing, the hurdles and the leaps and all the things required of this is monumental. And I know that a lot of offices are understaffed, and so you're probably doing 10 people's jobs right now, but I mean, I'm so impressed by all the states who have to do this work. So definitely.
I guess, are the states, I mean, with all this money, are the states, the broadband offices going to get bigger? Are they going to get staffed accordingly?
A lot of states are using their BEAD funding for 5-year term FTEs, but it really depends on the political climate and whether that's allowable even under federal funding. So we were lucky that we already had state funding to scale up from an office of 2 to an office of 7, and then I put 3 FTEs in our BEAD funding. So we're up to 9. I have 1 more to hire, and we were lucky enough to get a middle mile grant. So I'm also hiring a program manager for middle mile. So some states I think are really going to struggle, but they still have the funding for consultants. So it's really whether or not you want those jobs to be local to your state, or if you want to use those admin dollars on your consultants. But there is the support in the program.
Isn't broadband the one thing though that is nonpartisan? Doesn't everybody agree that everybody wants I mean,
yeah, I like to think so. I like to think we're that unicorn.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one. I mean, everything else I get, but it's hard to argue no, the person should not have broadband. That's just, that's just being a jerk, right? All right, so as we get, so that's 2020 into the year. What do you guys see for 2024? And I guess let's kind of round up of what's the advice, right? There's a lot of stakeholders we have in our industry that you guys work with. What advice should they be thinking about as we go into the new year? Because it's going to be a crazy busy year too next year.
I would encourage providers to really be committed to local consult. So start talking with the communities that you're interested in serving. That's going to be a consideration in any state's criteria. They really want to see that providers have engaged with the community. I start to identify the areas you're willing to go to and create those economic plans or the business plans and the network design. Start looking at that now, especially when volume 2 comes out and you're aware of how states are going to either allow providers to identify areas, or they're going to parse out the hexagons or whatever. So really start looking at that now and preparing, because those grant applications aren't easy, and that's why we need people like Megan. But if you have that preparation done on the front side, I think you're going to be a lot further along. I really encourage communities and other eligible entities like nonprofits and co-ops to really start looking at this money. I know they haven't really been in that space on a large scale prior to this opportunity, but start thinking if that's a better solution for your community than maybe going strictly with the ISP route.
Good advice. Lori, what do you think?
Everything Jade just said, I mean, I can't underscore the preparation aspect because enough. Virginia and Louisiana have published their volume 2s. So for any providers out there who think they want to participate in BEAD, even if it's not in the state that they're looking at, take a look at those volume 2s, because that gives you the best sense of what the heavy lift will be to put together these applications. And for anything that's a federal requirement, you can start doing that now. I mean, there's going to be some variation between how states manage different elements, but by and large, the requirements are the same, and these are things that providers need to be working on now. You need to be working on your, kind of identifying your project areas potentially. Look at the fabric, look at the state map, figure that out. Look at, what your costs will be. Start to get, even do some pre-procurement. I think procurement is we could talk for a whole hour around procurement, and then some. But for anyone who's been involved in procurement, you know how long it can take. So if you want to be able to develop an application with accurate costs based on the data right now, do your procurement before you get your grant application submitted, not after, because you only have one bite at the apple. You can't, if you find that you've under bid your budget, you can't go back and ask for more money. So make sure your costs are accurate.
Unless you're an RDOF winner.
Yeah, exactly.
Had to throw a little shade there.
Yeah, clearly.
I liked it.
What advice would you give?
I mean, I would absolutely echo the general sentiment of start working now, right? Don't wait until, you hear something's going to be opening, because it's going to be too late. I would say absolutely look at what the requirements would be. One thing that we're often talking a lot about is the cybersecurity requirements. And I know those are scary for some. And there are some grants coming out that can help folks. I would say to also talk to the states, and it's different for each state, whether it's like under their information services or IT, but they're getting money as well for cybersecurity. And so talking to them and seeing how you can fit in, if they have resources that can help you. But I was at a conference the other week, and someone said they weren't going to apply because they couldn't meet the cybersecurity requirement. And I said, well, there's ways for you to get there. Because I think, as was just said, you don't want to miss out on this opportunity. And so I would say
it's kind of scary though, right? Like some of these smaller providers that, I mean, you want, as you said, Jade, you want to embrace the local people and the local businesses, but I mean, if you're a small business, it's hard, right? It's hard to have, the resources or the staff or even if you need to hire somebody. I mean, cybersecurity is not cheap either, at all.
Yeah.
So Megan, are those part? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please.
No, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say, so I was just pushing it back to you because I forgot.
Thanks, Nick. You threw her off.
Sorry.
It was probably going to be a really great point too.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was going to be amazing. It's you clearly need fiber at your house though for the better connection. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that as we again go into fourth quarter, go into next year, that you really think, wow, this would be great to make sure people are aware of? And I guess the one other comment I'd say is the one thing I feel like there's so much activity on the process, but it doesn't seem to move as fast on the execution. The actual, let's get shit built. Let's get the stuff in the ground. Let's get people connected. Like, I feel like that still is slow. And I get, part of our country, I mean, I feel like every week there's a natural disaster or something going on with hurricanes or something happening that's affecting this. But is that just my perception, or is it just going freaking slow?
I think it is, but okay, so two things. First thing you asked, is there anything else people should know? And one thing I wanted to point out is, as these volume 2s go out, there is a required public comment piece. So weigh in if you think the process is ridiculous and it's going to result in a lack of applications. I mean, states are committed to successful implementation of these funds to bridge the digital divide. And so if they come up with something that's just off the wall, let that be known. I know that I take public comment very seriously and revise plans accordingly. And then number two, I agree with you on it takes forever, Nick. What we're really doing is trying to prioritize speed to deployment in our scoring, which is one of the secondary criteria allowed. All of our programs previously have been 24 months or less for the deployment timeline. And so Bead does allow for 4, but you're not going to get many points if you are going to come in there and say you're going to do it in 4. We want those dollars to go into the ground or on poles immediately, because there is an urgency to this need, right? And so I agree with you. It was a terrible frustration for me when I was on the private side, and I'm trying to channel that energy into getting dollars out quickly. I think our program plan for CPF got approved in July last year, and we had awards and projects starting that winter. I mean, we had awards announced in November, December, and January for all that money, and we've got programs wrapping up already from our CPF. 2 programs are already. Yeah.
All right. Anything else you would like to share?
My light went off like 45 minutes ago, and I don't know if I don't want to like get up and dance. I thought that would be awkward, and so I apologize.
Totally wave your hands around. Hey!
There we go. Let there be light.
Let there be light. Yeah. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. Like I said, I think it's really important things, and I think the challenge is you guys live in this world every day, but a lot of people don't, right? I mean, they're the recipients of it, and it's hard. And again, I think they get excited because there's so much activity going on, because money for broadband. And if I'm the consumer, put my consumer shoes on, like, great, but it's another year before I get access.
Yeah.
Like, that sucks, right?
What really sucks is when you have the press release and that customer in one of those areas, they don't recognize it's an infrastructure project that's going to take a lot of time, and there might be permitting, and there might be all kinds of, siting delays. And so it is terribly frustrating. We're trying to remedy that by creating a dashboard. I think Tamara did this in Virginia, where it kind of shows the progress at least. So people, it's kind of like that little United Way scale. How far are you on to the goal?
Right.
But yeah, I agree. It's definitely frustration. You can't.
That's why I think they don't even understand, or the electronic piece. Like we on one of the episodes, we got way deep into the sausage making of caching and the back end of the network and infrastructure, but people they don't care about that ultimately. They care about, can I get to Netflix? Can I get to YouTube? Can I do my video calls? Like, they don't. And when you say the word infrastructure, you're right, Jade. Like, most people, they don't always associate broadband and infrastructure together. And people don't know that you have to have, all these, the middle mile, the dark fiber. You have to, they just don't get it.
It's the interwebs. It just happens out there in the ether.
It's magic. It's magic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Nick, one last thought that I would love to leave everybody with, and is that anyone looking at putting together a Bead application should take a look at who got the middle mile awards from NTIA. See if that project can be leveraged. Because, one of the conditions of the middle mile award was that the applicant needed to be able to say that they could bring last mile projects to the table to utilize that backbone. So, that's one way to kind of make a little bit of your application shine a little bit. If you can say that you're going to leverage one of those middle mile projects, just a little kind of a small tidbit.
Is there anything, maybe this is a question for Megan though, I feel like we talk a lot about, again, the access to the infrastructure, but ultimately the benefit will be the application layer, right? That's ultimately where, if you have connectivity, high-speed connectivity, you can do more, but do you get higher points if you can you bring, layer on applications that benefit a community? Healthcare, health services?
Yeah, and one thing that I also excited about. So, I mentioned very beginning LDA, we have our broadband team, but we do a lot of other things. And so we have someone who's looking at a lot of electric grants right now. And, there's a lot of ways to combine projects like that. So, when you're thinking about dig once policies, there's a lot of funding that if you're talking to people, maybe not necessarily directly in what you do, there's an opportunity to collaborate and to, say, oh, if you're going to go for this, can I put some fiber in the ground too? Right. Or
maybe speed up the permitting process from that.
Yeah. And I think there's absolutely, ways to do that. And I think it also helps with, as Jade says, speed to deployment, right? So if someone's putting conduit in the ground and it's going to speed up your timeline to, get inside their conduit, and, that's a benefit for everyone. So I think there's definitely ways to really utilize different funding to get these projects done. I think, while we can, I would say, confidently say there's not going to be another investment like this, there may be others, but they're not going to be the same size. And what we have coming may not be enough, at least in this big one. So being creative about the grants you go for and who you're partnering with is kind of one way to tackle that and make sure that these funds can go as far as possible.
So one last question then. So, and I know we said broadband, we hope is not a partisan issue, but do you think that the deployment of the funds, will anything be slowed down as far as distribution until after the electoral cycle next year? Or do you think it'll keep on running?
I think people should always have that in the back of their minds, and that states have the opportunity to ask for funds early, 20 to 100% of their funding through an IPFR, initial proposal funding request, and maybe they should be doing that upon submission of their volume 2.
That was a solid answer.
Get it now before it's too late.
Get it right now.
Get it in the bank.
Yeah, you should just say snooze, you lose, right? Just come on.
Yeah.
And Jade has the great insight because she was also a mayor. So let's not forget she has the industry, she has the politics, she has the broadband office.
Oh man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the episode today. For all of our listeners, we are on YouTube, Spotify, online, everywhere except Twitter. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you. Yeah, X. Thank you so much, Megan, Lori, Jade, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.